start this painting, we're going to draw in perspective. I'm looking at my reference photo, and I'm seeing that I need to start out with doing 1-point perspective. What I've done is I've drawn the horizon line, and then I'm also adding the vanishing point on that one side. And I'm continuing to go ahead and work on the house and seeing the different angles of some of the things that are there, the roof, and then there's a small roof over that little porch area. And a lot of the times when I'm doing this, I have to draw it more than once. So be careful and draw lightly. And sometimes I'll draw without the ruler, and I found that I always come back and draw it with the ruler because I don't like the sketchiness of it. It just looks much better if I'm drawing it with the ruler. Be sure to include the edges and where the roof is on the side, where there's a little shadow coming down on the angle of that specific gable. Look at the size of the windows. Make sure you're getting the size of the windows and the doors correctly. It's better to draw them too small than to draw them too big. In this specific situation, I think I have that one window that's on the right side too big. But I fix that when I do my painting. Now, remember to keep this simple. Don't be trying to draw every single little detail that's there. But knowing the main shapes is going to help you with the house later. After I get the house done, then I went ahead and put in the fence. The fence is in perspective as well. The end of it I have going back to that vanishing point. Then I came in with my ruler and added the 2 main rows of the wood coming down, and now I'm coming in and drawing the fence posts coming down. Now in this specific one, if you'll look, the fence posts right in front of that house, they are light. So I don't have to show as much detail in those as the ones that are down farther. Adding the trees. Notice I have the 2 trees there, I have the one in the front and the one in the back. Now we're starting to paint with watercolor. And I'm adding that light color first, that light yellow. And that light yellow is showing where the light is. I'm looking at my photograph and noticing where that light is. And all the contrasts that are going to be around it, all the paint, it needs to be darker. And the situation is sometimes after this dries that the paint that's around it isn't dark enough, so you have to add another layer of paint on the top of it. I saw some light places on the tree, so I went ahead and added that. Now we're going to mix up a warm gray for some of the shadows. So in this specific one, I've mixed it up, and now I'm going to put this on the house itself. This is the darker area, probably starting out light. Now, I made a mistake. I don't think it needed to be on that specific place. So what I did was I just took a paper towel and I dabbed it, and it took the paint right off. I added a little more blue for kind of a greenish tint to it, so I get the front of it. I changed this front a lot because I did not get it dark enough, and you'll see in the final painting that I just finally made it really, really dark and went with that. It really made the house, the light in the house pop. Make sure that you're using that hairdryer a lot. After you do a main glaze or after you do a main wash, make sure you dry it. So for this sky, we got it wet first, and then I'm just coming over with some of this blue that I have. Again, we're going to make this a little bit darker. Went right over the tops of the trees. I even did this after I've painted the trees once because I didn't think it was dark enough. Glazing is important. Using that hairdryer is important. Put a little bit of Payne's gray in there to make those dark clouds up there in the distance. This photograph was not necessarily nighttime, so it's not a true nocturne, but it is late evening, and that's why that sun is so bright. Now here we're going to take it's actually an X-Acto knife. You can use whatever you want that's sharp, and I'm scratching into that paint so I can see the trunks there. And as I dry it, you can really tell how that scratching has helped. That keeps you from having to paint all those little lines. It's a nice technique to use. Coming in with that same color, but just a little bit more brown added to it, and I'm going to use that for the roof. Once again, I saw this color and I thought, oh, you know what, that looks just too gold. So I kind of lifted some of it up, and I'm going to make it darker, add a little bit of texture to it. Now I'm coming in with that gray again. I'm making it a little bit darker and adding those shadows. Since that is dry, I can come in with a darker and also thicker consistency of that paint and show those shadows right next to the other ones, and that way they do not blend together. But shadows are really important when you're painting this type of painting. All right, I'm adding a little bit darker and adding some texture. I believe I take it even darker when I do that. Do a little bit of the sky again. You can see already how darkening that roof really helped. Now I'm mixing up a tree color with burnt umber, raw umber, raw scene. I just kind of experimented. That's why I've got the paper out there and played around with what color I should use. I finally decided I wanted it to be warmer as opposed to the darker, cooler color. Now, painting trees, there's a secret. You need to make sure that you're looking to see where exactly the light is coming from. You'll have one side of the tree is darker, one side of the tree is lighter. In this specific situation, there's a very, very bright light on the left-hand side. And I want to come in here in just a minute. I'm going to take my X-Acto knife and scratch in that section because I got it too dark. So I'm dabbing it a little bit and then scratching to lift it. Now when you're scratching, you don't want to scratch too hard. You just want to lift off that paint. Now I'm using a darker consistency of that same paint, adding a little bit of gray to it, and that helps make it. Now you can see right away how that really adds that texture. Leaving the light color underneath, and then the dark color, you add some lines in there, and that really helps make the texture of the tree. Trees are one of my favorite things to paint. So I'm coming up here and finishing out with the branches on the top. And then I'm going to use my rigger brush to do the tops. But I believe before I do that, I do one more swatch on the top. I dry it all off. And I do some more paint on the top because again, it's that sky is not dark enough. A dark sky and contrast are so important. So I go right over that tree even though I dried it. A little bit of the brown gets into the sky, but that's okay because once I cover it up again, you'll never notice. So I come back over with that dark paint on top of the tree again. So the same mixture, this time I'm darkening it even more. Adding more Payne's Gray to it, but being careful just to add this on the shadow area, looking at my picture very carefully. Now I'm using my rigger brush. When you use a rigger brush, it's important not to push down really hard, but you're just kind of flicking it across the paper. If you've never used a rigger brush, you need to practice on a piece of paper first. Also, put it down and just move it and go where the rigger brush wants to go. Don't force it. So that you can see those natural looking branches where they're not straight. There's no straight branches on a tree. More branches over here on the side. Now in these branches I lightened it a little bit. I just added just a little bit of water so that it was a lighter color, a lighter gray, and because those are in the distance. Now I need to darken up that gray on the sides. adding a little bit of shadow. And this is the fun part. This is negative painting. I'm using that same gray and I'm painting in the windows, and I'm leaving that little line that was yellow in between the windows. And what that does, it creates a detail without you having to paint it. Plus, it's yellow opposed to the darker brown or the gray of the window. And now I'm going into the porch. I'm doing the same thing. Now the porch is a little bit lighter. It's not quite as dark, but I'm using the negative painting here as well. I decided that the shadow on the side of the house was not dark enough, especially if I wanted that yellow to pop a little bit more. I want the contrast. I'm always looking at building up those contrasts. So the glazing is really important. Also coming in, I have a flat brush. This is about, probably a 1/2 inch flat brush. So I'm using it on the fence. I'm also using it on the shadows on the side of the house. It just makes it a little bit easier. Taking my small round brush now and softening those edges. Now taking a darker mixture of that gray, I mixed up even more to get that shadow on the inside of the house where there's no light hitting it. It's going to be even darker. Doing negative painting on the window that's up there on the side. And then adding a little bit of the detail, not too much. One thing about detail and shadows is that the contrast needs to be high in those as well. So on the roof, I went ahead and added a darker brown and left the lighter brown underneath. And when I do that, you can see the texture a little bit better. There's another tree behind the house that I did not get earlier, so I'm adding that with the rigger brush, wetting down a little bit of the trees in the very background, adding a little bit of brown to that. Now for the siding detail, I am not afraid to use a pencil to show detail, and I think the siding detail was really important. So I just took my ruler and then slowly moved it down and then drew straight across to draw the siding on the side of the house as well in that warm little section there right underneath the roof. I'm looking very carefully at the porch. There's a couple small areas of negative painting that I wanted to add. And here is the final painting.